Joining me now from your LA Kings, Sean O'Donnell. How are you doing, Sean?
I'm doing well, Jesse. Thank you. Well as can be expected right now, but I'm doing okay.
Right. You always got to add the caveat, right?
Yeah.
But, fortunate to be here with you. Appreciate it. Let's dive right into it because we've all got stuff to do today. Before we get into the depth chart, I want to talk about the Kings defensemen that are under contract and will be returning next season. Obviously, Drew Doughty, Matt Roy, Curtis McDermott, and Sean Walker is restricted free agent. Any quick summation of those four guys? And I'm assuming Sean Walker will be back.
Well, I think Drew, he's probably the one we just need the briefest amount to talk about on him. He's been with the Kings now for, I don't know what it is, 10 or 11 years, and we know what Drew can do. So obviously we're excited to have Drew back. And I think if you go to the other three guys, I think it was a very encouraging year. I think Curtis McDermott 2 years ago spent most of the year with the Kings. Last year he was up and down a little bit, and then this year again stuck with the Kings all year. Just kind of provides that presence along the left side, keeps people honest. Hardest working guy probably on the team, hard in practice. Just a great team guy to have around, and has come on leaps and bounds since he turned pro. And then you have Sean Walker, who give all the credit in the world to. He signed an American League deal coming out of Bowling Green a couple of years ago. Was a prospect, but certainly not one of the top prospects coming out. But that's what's great about this league is, we say the cream rises. It doesn't matter if you're a first rounder or you're an invite like Sean was. If you play well and you're good at your craft and you work hard, it doesn't matter who you are. You can make it, and he's been proof of that. He was a huge asset to the Kings this year. And then Matty Roy, who came from Michigan Tech, kind of an unheralded guy, late pick. And again, Matty, I think if you talk to the coaches, I don't think there was a player on the team that improved or impressed the coaches who, didn't really know a whole lot about coming in. But I'll tell you what, by the end of the year, you talk to, Coach McClellan and all the other ones there, and he's just a guy that just shot up the radar as far as how much they trusted in him and how hard he worked and the kind of pro he was. So we're excited that all three of those guys are going to be coming back and be members of the Kings for the future.
Not to get off on a tangent, but Roy and Walker are a pretty good example of why I don't put too much stock in people who rank prospects within an organization. You get a top 10 prospect list or whatever. Maybe the ceiling is a bit higher on some guys, but a year ago, 2 years ago, I don't think anybody was talking about Matt Roy or Sean Walker, and they've proven themselves NHL players.
And they really have. And the reality, the thing that I've learned in this from playing and then from being involved in development is that you kind of think what a player is going to be at the next level, but
Right.
You really don't know. There's the special elite players that you just know are going to be able to, their game will translate. But, until someone comes and sees what the demands of being a pro are like and sees just how good these players are, it doesn't matter really how much skill you have. It's how quickly can you pick up on the nuances, how quickly do you learn what other players do and what you should do in certain situations. Again, we all make mistakes, but it's, how often do players make that same mistake over and over again? If you learn from it and you cut down on making that mistake again, then you will improve. And you really don't know how well someone's going to do that until they get to this level. So, it's something we keep in mind. There's a lot of people excited about the prospects that we have coming in as far as people outside the Kings organization. But again, our job is to get these guys, work with them, put them in situations where we feel they can improve, and then it's up to them.
So let's take a look at that depth chart because we've got the NHL draft lottery coming up on the 26th. Not entirely sure when the draft will be, but we want to give Kings fans an idea of what is already in the system before we start worrying about what to add. Mikey Anderson played a handful of games at the end of this season. He's a left shot defenseman. He's a player that, we talked about Jack Campbell as being a guy that people queue up to tell you what a nice guy he is. I feel like every time I say Mikey Anderson's name, someone's going to be knocking on my door to tell me that he's going to wear a letter for the team someday. Is that hyperbole? Is he really that clear of a leader?
I think so. And you know what? You kind of took away the first point I was going to make.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. To all the credit goes to our amateur scouting staff to find a guy like Mike, I believe in the fourth round, that went ahead and played. It's very difficult to play in the World Juniors as an 18-year-old. And Mikey was the guy that did that. And then as his 19-year-old, you're talking about the best 19-year-olds in the country. And he was the captain of that team. And even this year, his first year pro, you talked to the coaching staff that was there in Ontario. You talked to the veteran players, Brent Sutter, those guys. The leaps that he took and the comfort that he had in that room where he doesn't say a whole lot, but he would lead by example and he'd say the right thing at the right time. And again, there's nothing wrong with young guys coming in and taking that leadership role as long as they do the other things that veterans see that they're willing to back it up and follow their lead and do the right thing. People can talk all they want, but if you're not willing to do the right thing and play the right way and practice the right way, it's all, it doesn't mean anything. So Mikey does that. He says the right thing. He does the right thing. And like I said, I haven't met a coach from his college coach to, the U.S. team was Joe Motzko was the coach there. And then you talk to Mike Stothers and Chris Height this year. Everybody says the same thing about Mikey. He's just a great guy to work with, and his IQ is as far as hockey goes, his IQ is off the charts. He's a very, very intelligent hockey player.
Well, he's young. He's a good leader, like you said, and hopefully we will see lots more of him in the future. We mentioned Doughty, Walker, and Roy, all of them right-handed shots. I don't know how important it is to you, Sean. I know that in the 2012 run, the Kings went with a lefty-righty pair on all three pairs. And it's sort of set up in my mind. I don't know. I just like the idea of right shooting guys on the right side. So we've got Anderson, McDermott on the left, another player in the depth in the system who's a left-handed shot and has a lot of people talking about him, Tobias Bjornfot. Are we going to see him in a Kings uniform in the next 20 months?
In the next 20 months, for sure. This year, we'll wait and see. I mean, that's going to be up to Tobias the coming year. Again, we don't want to rush. He's 19 years old, and I think he came in, surprised so many people with how good he was, how early that he made the team out of camp this year. And then after a couple of games, when the big boys pick it up, once it starts, you realize that he's only 18 years old. He's got a lot of growing, a lot of physical maturation he has to get to. But again, his hockey IQ, his skating, the way he thinks the game is off the charts. That's why he was the first rounder. So, we don't really – it's kind of a wait-and-see approach as far as Toby. I think we're all in that wait-and-see approach because we don't know what next year is going to bring as far as scheduling. But, hopefully there's a World Juniors. We know he'd be part of that for Sweden, whether he's with the Kings, whether he's down with the Ring, whether he's up and down. We'll just wait and see. The players tell us when they're ready. If, we can have all the thoughts and all the plans in our mind and pencil guys in at a certain time. The players, the way they play, the way they behave, the way they train, they tell us when they're ready. So, but yeah, 20 minutes I think is a very safe bet to say Tobias will be a full-time King within 20 months.
So everybody who followed the Reign knows that they struggled. Struggle may not be the right word, but they had more defensemen than they had minutes to give out. I think at one point they had somewhere around 9, 10, maybe even 11 guys on the blue line on the roster. So we mentioned Mikey Anderson. We mentioned Tobias Bjornfot. But we have to start getting into guys like Sean Durzi, Marcus Phillips, who returned back to Major Junior to play his overage year, Cale Clegg, Jacob Muvrare may come back from Sweden. Daniel Brickley is still under contract. And, of course, we have players like Cole Holtz, Jordan Spence signing their entry-level contracts, and even Kim Nusianen, who's still out there, and Braden Doyle, I think, even. So
it's exhausting.
It's a lot of guys. Obviously, Durzi, high profile as a result of being involved in the Muzzin trade, and Cale Clegg, a lot of talk about him getting some time in the NHL. 2 seasons ago, he came up for a cup of coffee. This season, are Durzi and Clegg the leaders in that next group of depth defensemen?
Well, I think definitely Cale Clegg. I think that this would be, he's followed 2 years pro now, and it's been very unfortunate for Cale because 2 years ago, there was a really good chance that he was going to get called up and kind of get a taste of what the NHL is like in the regular season. I know those guys get preseason games, but it's just not the same. It's not the same. So he broke his foot, I think, around February of, it would have been 2019, which derailed the rest of his year. And odds are he probably would have gotten a handful of games. And you get those games at the end of the year, like Mikey Anderson did this year, and it just changes the way you train in the summertime, your mentality. Once you get a taste of what the NHL is like, you're in the locker room. Mentally, you've been there for 5 or 8 or 10 games. It just changes the way your outlook, the way you approach everything, the next summer, the next training camp, everything. So very unfortunate for Cale that, he broke his foot. Came to camp this year, was one of the last cuts, if not the last cut on defense. So he was very close to making the Kings out of camp this year. Again, as the year went on, we had this pause in March, and he was very close again. So you feel a little bit bad for Cale because it's 2 years in a row where he has done everything right. He's worked hard. There has been a lot of defensemen within the organization, but he's gotten himself a point where he's ready for a call up. And then, for the last 2 years, something has happened that has not been able to have that happen. So it's going to be up to Cale next year to come to camp, have a great camp. But yes, he's definitely a guy that we have circled as we feel would be the next one ready to make that step.
We mentioned all those names, and obviously the Kings farm system is ranked number one by a number of different publications. I'm curious, without getting into specific names, forward, defense, even goalies, if you're already 22, 23, that sort of age, and you haven't yet cracked the lineup with the Kings having something like 11 picks, how much does the likelihood of making an NHL roster decrease season by season as more younger players join the organization?
Well, I mean, it's a numbers game, and every year there are new. Like next year, we're going to have some of the players that were drafted last year, 2 years ago. Like you mentioned, Cole Holtz turning pro. We had a trade now. We have Madden coming over. We have Turcotte turning pro. Fagemo. So you're right. Every year, new guys come and new blood comes in. So it's up to those guys that have been here for maybe going on year 3 to make sure that they prepare this summer. And that's what we're telling these guys: is take that step and make that impression next year. Because it's just a fact that when more players become part of an organization, your chances go down a little bit. Now, having said that, a lot of those guys, your first year pro, a lot of players aren't ready. So those players aren't ready yet. But it is paramount as you turn, year 2 and year 3, that you really get that mindset that it's kind of LA Kings or bust, because you don't want to go back down. And then, next thing you know, the third year goes to your fourth year now, and then your time starts to dwindle. But again, it's not like these players are 25, 26 years old. A lot of them have turned pro at 19 or 20, so they're only 22, maybe 23. They're still young guys. So we don't feel like we have a ceiling or a cap as far as, well, it's a third-year pro and they haven't made it yet. We should see about moving them, or let's focus on the new crop coming in. A lot of players develop at different levels. So we still feel like the guys that are third year, even the guys turning fourth year, you look at a guy like Matt Luff, he's going to be given every chance next year to make that team, even though it's his third year pro and we have other guys coming in. These are still guys that we're high on, and still guys we have a lot of optimism for.
Well, Sean, I want to thank you for joining me. I always love talking to you. I've told you this before. I'll continue to tell you, one of the sharpest hockey minds, and the opinion I trust incredibly highly. So thanks very much for joining us.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Jesse. Anytime.